Hi, I'm Madison. They called me a cheap doormat. My own family said I'd keep paying their bills, as long as they faked a smile, and called me sis. I wasn't supposed to see it. But one night, I picked up my sister's iPad, a group chat. My name, mockery, manipulation, receipts. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. But the next day, I invited them all to lunch. And let's just say, by dessert, they couldn't swallow a single word. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever uncovered the truth? Not through yelling, but through silence. Where are you listening from tonight? And what would you have done? Drop it in the comments. Let's begin. I woke up before the alarm. The light through my blinds painted soft stripes across the walls, and for a moment, the quiet almost felt kind. Cora, my landlord, was already awake as always. Her arthritis made morning slow, but she still insisted on folding her own laundry, stubborn in the way only someone who's seen too much can be. I brought her the tea she liked, chamomile, with 2 drops of honey, and laid her pills out next to a napkin with a little orange slice. It wasn't much, but she always smiled like it meant the world. "Your family coming today?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. I hesitated. "Bethany's birthday?" She nodded slowly. "They treat you right." Yet I gave her the smile I reserved for loaded questions. "They remember me when bills are due. That counts for something." She chuckled, raspy and low. "Well, let them remember you when you stop answering." I bent to pick up an old pair of reading glasses from under the coffee table. "I'll bring a gift basket. Nothing fancy, just things I know she likes. You always bring more than what's asked." I shrugged. I've learned not to show up empty-handed. Makes it harder for them to say I brought nothing to the table. By late morning, I'd packed 2 baskets, one with a bottle of wine, artisan crackers, her favorite hand cream from that boutique near Lincoln Park. The second was filled with homemade, baked ziti in lemon bars I'd made at dawn. I placed them carefully into the back seat next to Marshmallow, my rescue mutt, who looked at me with eyes that always seemed to understand too much. Before I left, I triple-checked the locks, watered the single basil plant on my kitchen windowsill, and tucked my paralegal files into the drawer. One of my freelance clients, a messy divorce case, had left me notes full of contradictions last night, and I'd need a clear head later to untangle the web of lies. The drive to Bethany's place in Naperville felt longer than usual, maybe because I already knew how it would go. Polite hugs, too loud laughter, side eyes, the kind of affection that evaporates the second the dishes are cleared. When I pulled into her driveway, the sounds of pop music and clinking glasses poured from the open back patio. I stood at the front door for a moment, balancing both baskets, wondering why I always felt like I was walking into a room that had already decided I didn't belong. I knocked. No answer. So I let myself in. The kitchen smelled like takeout, posing as gourmet. Wine bottles lined the counter. A half-eaten charcuterie board sat under plastic wrap. I called out a soft, "Hello," and placed the baskets neatly on the table. Bethany poked her head in finally. "Oh, hey, Madison. You didn't have to bring anything." I gave a small smile. "Just a little something I threw together." She smirked. "You and your baskets. So wholesome." From the patio, someone laughed, a little too loud. My brother-in-law, Derek Look, who brought another casserole. Madison's solution to everything: bake it or pay for it. The words stung, but I swallowed them like I'd been trained to since childhood. I reached for a glass of water from the sink and steadied my breath. I'd learned long ago that arguing didn't change minds. It only confirmed their opinion of you being too sensitive. I sat at the edge of the kitchen island, barely noticed. The conversations around me blurred into one another, high-pitched and pointless talk of spin classes, spa days, who was splitting, which Airbnb for their fall trip. That's when I noticed Bethany's iPad. Unlocked, screen still glowing, left next to the cheese knife. I didn't mean to touch it, but my hand moved out of instinct. I used to help her with tech stuff, setting up passwords, syncing her calendar, and my fingerprints still worked. The screen opened to the Messages app. A thread was already highlighted. The title made my breath catch. Doormat Club. Curiosity burned hotter than caution. I tapped, and there it was. Thread after thread of my mother Bethany, our cousin Mia, and Derek, sending screenshots of my Venmo payments, messages I'd sent asking about overdue rent, even photos of the grocery bags I'd dropped off when Mom couldn't get out in the heat. They'd turn me into a running joke. She thinks she's helping, bless her. She's addicted to being needed. Got a dentist bill. Cue tears. She'll cover it. Just send her a photo of Mom looking tired. She opens her wallet like it's reflex. And then my mother's words, unmistakably hers. She's not family. She's a wallet with a sad smile. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I simply placed the iPad back exactly as it was and walked out the front door. No one stopped me. As I drove home, the streetlights flickered one by one, as if bowing their heads. I turned off my phone halfway through the drive. I didn't want to risk a, "Hey, where'd you go?" text sent out of guilt, not care. I pulled into the driveway, let Marshmallow out, and sat on the stoop as the last glow of daylight disappeared. Inside, I poured a glass of water. No wine, no drama, just silence. I opened the small jewelry box where I'd kept the glass bracelet my mother gave me when I was 8. It used to mean something, used to remind me of bedtime songs and pancakes on Sundays. I took it out, placed it on the coffee table, and stared at it. Something inside me shifted, not shattered, but settled. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. Then I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened a folder on my laptop. One I'd named years ago, but never used, family records. The laptop's screen glowed softly in the quiet of my apartment. The only sounds were the low hum of the fridge and the occasional creak from the radiator pipes. I didn't hesitate this time, didn't second-guess myself, or wonder if I was overreacting. My fingers moved on muscle memory. Click, click, click. The folder named Family Records opened like a box I'd buried long ago and had finally decided to exhume. I started with the oldest files: Venmo transfers, bank statements, digital receipts. Most were small, at first $40 here for Mom's medication, $110 for Bethany's car repair. Then it snowballed. Rent for 3 months, a co-pay for a surprise root canal, emergency flights to Florida because Mia had a panic attack and couldn't fly coach. Each entry had a note, a timestamp, and ironically, my overly polite tone. Just let me know if you need anything else. No need to pay back, I'm happy to help. I paused and scrolled back up. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped expecting anything in return. I wasn't being generous. I was being groomed. By the time I got to last year's records, the total was over $117,000. I leaned back in my chair and let the number sit with me. $117,000. That wasn't just help. That was funding. That was being the unofficial bank of a family that laughed behind my back and called me a wallet with a sad smile. And I'd kept the receipts like a fool who still hoped one day they'd say thank you. The screen blurred for a second as a dull ache built behind my eyes. I blinked it away. No tears tonight. I opened a new folder, Atlas. The name made my spine straighten. That was the side of me they didn't know. The part that hadn't just survived, she'd studied, prepared, planned. For the past 2 years, I'd been consulting remotely for a boutique law firm in New Hampshire. Not flashy work, but solid. Estate planning, financial protections, elder abuse audits. I'd taken on the quiet, complicated cases no one wanted because I understood what it felt like to be used in the name of love. I pulled up the draft of a legal trust I'd started last fall, half finished and forgotten until now. It was designed to secure what little was left of my father's estate. His pension shares a rural land parcel and a small vintage coin collection he'd meant to pass down to whoever keeps their integrity. At the time, I wasn't sure what that meant. Now I did. I adjusted the trust structure, removed my mother's name, then Bethany's, then Mia's. I added a charity clause. Instead, quiet, simple. The assets would go to a scholarship fund for kids aging out of foster care. Not a single cent would go to those who mocked the hand that held them up. I saved the file, encrypted the folder, and backed it up twice. Then I opened my banking app. I froze all joint credit lines I had with my mom, ones I'd signed years ago, just in case she needed help with medical bills. Autopay for her gas and electricity canceled. The life insurance policy where she was still listed as my sole beneficiary. I filed the form for reassignment. There was no grand announcement, no dramatic phone call, just quiet action, like slipping out of a room without letting the door slam. I got up to stretch and wandered to the kitchen. The soft glow of the microwave clock at 11:43 p.m. I opened the fridge, not because I was hungry, but out of habit. There, right next to the leftover soup container, was a stack of sticky notes I used for grocery lists. I pulled one off and grabbed a pen. If they only love you when you're useful, you're not loved, you're leased. Dad had said that one night after I'd just paid Bethany's mortgage for the 3rd time. I'd laughed it off, then thought he was being bitter. Turns out, he was just telling the truth before I was ready to hear it. I stuck the note to the fridge door, just below a fading photo of us fishing by Lake Geneva. He had that crooked half smile, the one he only wore when he was proud of me. "Thanks for waiting, Dad," I whispered. The room felt warmer somehow. Not in temperature, but in something deeper. I didn't feel lonely tonight. I felt intact. I turned off the lights, except the one over the stove, and carried my laptop back to the couch. As I sat, I saw a notification flash across the screen. "Bethany invited you to Sunday brunch. Fam." Only I stared at it for a moment, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I clicked, yes, and I smiled. The morning sun had already slipped past the blinds when I finished brushing the dog hair off my blazer. Deep forest green, crisp lines. Not too flashy, not too soft. Just enough structure to remind myself, and them, that I was no longer the same version of Madison they'd leaned on, like a human ATM. I double-checked my bag. Slim folder tucked in, zipped tight. Then I slid my phone into the side pocket, smoothed the sleeves of my blazer, and headed out the door. The drive to Naperville was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of the turn signal at red lights. I parked just around the corner from the restaurant, giving myself a few moments to breathe before walking in. The brunch spot was quaint in that curated kind of way. Framed vintage ads on the wall, chipped white mugs that were meant to look charming. I spotted them right away at the corner booth. My mother, Sylvia Bethany, Mia Bethany's husband, Greg, and their daughter, Kennedy, now somehow already a teenager. They looked up as I approached. Madison Bethany's voice stretched too wide, fake delight, dripping like syrup. You look rested. Guess it pays to have no kids or responsibilities. I pulled my chair back slowly. Or maybe just to stop paying for someone else's, I said, sliding into the booth with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Sylvia stirred her coffee like it owed her rent. So she said carefully, "My online account's been glitching. Weirdest thing. I couldn't even check the power bill this week." "That's strange," I replied, reaching for the menu. "Maybe it's time to upgrade your password." "Yeah," Bethany added, glancing at her husband. "Mine got declined, buying school supplies yesterday. I thought it was fraud or something." I looked up, meeting her gaze directly. That must have been frustrating. There was a silence that wasn't really silent, the kind that hovers above, polite words, thick and expectant. They wanted to corner me, but not yet. Not while the waitress was still pouring water and asking if we wanted the cinnamon rolls to share. I waited until the waitress walked away before placing my phone gently on the table. No theatrics, just a single swipe to unlock the screen. "Before we order," I said evenly, "I think we should all look at something together." They leaned in out of habit. One tap, there it was, a screenshot of their group chat. "She's like a bank with a soul. Just smile, she'll pay. LOL. Watch her give us more when we pretend mom's sick again." Forks froze mid-air. Even Kennedy's phone slipped quietly under the table. I glanced up. "You left it open on your iPad, Bethany. I wasn't snooping. I was paying your phone bill." Again. Her mouth parted in shock, then snapped shut. Then the tears came. Too fast. Too polished. That was a joke. It was out of context. "You don't know how stressful things have been. Greg got furloughed, and the dental bills." "Stop." My voice was quiet, flat. "You don't need to spin this." Sylvia cleared her throat, playing the elder card. "We've all struggled, Madison. You always had more. And family helps family, right?" I nodded slowly. "I didn't mind helping," I said. I minded being lied to. It wasn't loud. No shouting. No slam napkins. Just a shift in the air, like the moment before a storm, when the birds fall silent, and even the trees seem to brace themselves. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. Mia tensed. Bethany's hand hovered near her coffee. Sylvia looked away. I opened the folder and laid down the first paper. Bethany's cosmetic surgery invoice, labeled and dated. Paid in full. Then Mia's 3 months of back rent. Next, Sylvia's copay from that hospital visit she insisted was an emergency. One by one, they formed a quiet pile. $117,000, I said, almost whispering. This isn't help. This was a system. I just didn't know I was the only one who didn't realize it. Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Hey, maybe this isn't the place." "No," I said, turning toward him. "It's exactly the place. Because this was never just about money. It was about trust, about being used." Bethany looked ready to crumble. "We needed it." "Then you should have asked." I cut in gently, not plotted. Sylvia blinked hard. "So what now, Madison? You just cut us off." I took a slow sip of water, let the pause stretch long enough to leave room for silence to sting. "No, I just see clearly now. That's all." I pushed my chair back and stood up. "Oh," in the house I added, brushing crumbs off my lap. "You'll need to be out by Thursday." I didn't look back. Not at the table. Not at Bethany's frozen expression. Not even at my mother's slightly trembling hand clutching her fork. I walked straight out of that sunlit brunch spot and let the door swing shut behind me. Outside, the Illinois air carried a breeze sharp enough to sting, but my skin didn't flinch. I got in my car, buckled up, and just sat for a moment, with both hands resting on the wheel. Calm, or something trying hard to resemble it. The keys to the house weighed differently in my purse now, no longer symbolic of shared space or guilt-soaked generosity. Now they felt precise, decisive, like tools or weapons. The drive home was familiar and quiet. Monday morning traffic hadn't thickened yet. I passed the corner store where Sylvia used to buy cheap birthday balloons, drove past Bethany's favorite salon, paid for more than once with emergency transfers from my account. And then I turned onto my own street, lined with the same sleepy maples that had stood guard for decades. But as I pulled into the driveway, the glow of the porch light sliced through something in me. It shouldn't have been on. I hadn't been home in 4 nights. And there it was, Bethany's laundry basket sitting halfway up the front steps, one pink hoodie drooping out like a flag of entitlement, a pair of gym shoes thrown beside it. Inside, through the slats of the blinds, I spotted Mia's reusable water bottle on my coffee table. My couch, my mug on the windowsill had lipstick. Not mine. It wasn't home anymore. It was a waiting room for people who never planned to leave. I didn't go inside. Instead, I drove to my lawyer's office in downtown Naperville. I'd called ahead before leaving the restaurant, asked for a short consult. No details. Just, "I'm ready now." Mr. Kelly greeted me in the lobby with a folder, already in hand, eyes kind but questioning. "You're ready to initiate?" "Yes," I said, sitting down across from him, not bothering with small talk. "I want to file for possession. 72-hour notice for unauthorized residence." He blinked. "Family." "Yes." A pause. Then a nod. "Then I'll be delicate but direct in the language." I slid a copy of the deed across the table. Clean, untouched. My name, Madison D. Westlake, sat alone, bold and unshared at the top. No add-ons. No co-signers. Just me. I never added anyone, I said quietly. His eyes scanned the document, then looked up. "They've been staying there for how long?" "Years." He didn't say anything judgmental, just started typing. Papers printed. I signed. He witnessed. By the time I left his office, the sun had started to dip. The street lamps flickered in competition with the amber light settling across the trees. I stopped by the locksmiths on my way back, handed them the specs, and set the appointment for 8:30 p.m. At precisely 8:28, 2 young men in navy polo shirts rang the bell and changed every lock on every exterior door without asking a single question. When they finished, I handed each of them a tip in cash and thanked them softly. The old keys I slipped into a brown paper envelope and set on the fireplace mantel. A quiet ending. Then I printed a short notice in 14-point font and taped it to the inside of the front door's glass pane. Resident status changed. Please retrieve personal belongings by Thursday at 8:00 p.m. Entry will not be granted after that. Within an hour, the calls started. Bethany's number popped up first. Decline. Then Mia. Then Sylvia. Text messages buzzed in. "Is this a joke? Madison, what are you doing? You can't be serious." Then came the voicemails. "You're being cruel. You said you loved us. We're your family." I walked away from the phone, turned on the record player in the living room, and dropped the needle on an old Dinah Washington album. Her voice rose and swirled through the air, pushing back the desperate ringtones like fog receding from light. Just under the door, a subpoena slid through. I stared at the thin manila envelope on the floor for a moment before picking it up. It was angled, just so, like someone had taken care to slide it under, with the crease perfectly aligned against my doormat. The chill from the hallway seeped through the crack in the door, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the precision. The paper inside crackled softly as I unfolded it. A subpoena filed by Bethany. The accusations: unlawful eviction, financial exploitation, emotional distress. I let out a soft exhale, sharp at the end. My first instinct wasn't rage or even fear. It was a bitter kind of amusement. I walked to the kitchen, laid the document on the counter, and leaned on my elbows. So this was her next move. The wording danced in front of me as I scanned. She claimed I'd promised the house was shared. She cited years-old string of text messages, ones that, taken out of context, might sound like I had invited her to stay indefinitely. She really wants to fight this in court, I murmured, shaking my head slowly. She's forgotten who taught her to read contracts in the first place. The next morning, I met with my attorney in a quiet office downtown. I arrived 10 minutes early, coffee in hand, and a burgundy leather folder under my arm. It was the same folder I'd once used for PTA budgets and family schedules. Ironic, given its new contents. Inside were the deed in my name, always had been, 10 years' worth of utility bills, mortgage payments, maintenance receipts, every dollar mine. Screenshots of group texts. The ones where Bethany and the others called me a cheap doormat, joked about draining me dry, and once, chillingly, Bethany had typed, "She'll keep paying if we just fake love." Watch. My attorney, Mrs. Lang, a woman in her 60s, with eyes sharper than broken glass, flipped through the folder in silence. Her finger hovered over the group chat printouts. She looked up at me. They handed you your defense and your dignity. I let that settle between us. No need for a smile, no victory lap, just clarity. The pre-trial mediation was scheduled for the next afternoon. It was held in a small, nondescript conference room inside the courthouse. Beige walls, faux wood table, and a clock that ticked too loudly. Bethany walked in with a tissue, already in her hand, eyes misted, but dry. She had that sheepish tilt to her head, like someone who'd just been caught sneaking candy, but wanted you to feel bad for her anyway. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said, voice cracking just enough to sound practiced. "We were a family. I didn't think you'd change." I said nothing. The mediator, a calm, middle-aged woman with a notepad and a tired expression, asked if I had anything to share before opening negotiations. I slid one photo across the table. Just one. A screenshot of Bethany's message. "Madison will keep paying if we just fake love. Watch." The mediator went silent. Bethany's face flushed immediately. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a faint gasp, like she'd lost her line in a play she'd written. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm done." She blinked, caught off guard. "This isn't revenge, it's relief." With that, I stood and left. No threats, no raised voices, just my heels clicking across the tile floor, steady and final. By the time I made it across the street to a small cafe, the emotional heaviness was beginning to lift. I chose a corner table near the window, the kind of spot where you could disappear into the hum of downtown life. I ordered a plain coffee, black no sugar, and watched the courthouse entrance across the street. I didn't check my phone at first. I just sat with the warmth of the mug between my palms, breathing in the quiet. It felt earned, but eventually the screen lit up. 27 unread messages. Bethany, our mother, even my brother, who hadn't said more than 10 words to me since last Christmas. Some pleaded, some accused. One simply read, "Who are you now?" I didn't respond. Instead, I glanced at my reflection in the cafe window. The woman looking back at me didn't look bitter. She didn't look afraid. She looked free. I took another sip, the coffee grounding me. The outside world blurred behind the window glass, and for once, it didn't matter who was watching. But online, that was a different story. 2 days later, Sylvia made her move. She posted in the local Naperville Facebook community group, a space usually reserved for lost dogs and garage sale announcements. Her post was calculated dripping with false vulnerability. Some daughters are raised to be grateful. Some turn into snakes. After everything we sacrificed, our daughter left us sick, starving, abandoned. Pray for us. By noon, it had over 100 comments. Some offered prayers. Others, people I barely knew, hurled judgment like stones. Ungrateful brat. Parents give you life, and you spit on them. For a second, my hand shook so hard, I almost dropped the phone. Nora, my closest friend since college, glanced over from the kitchen counter, her brows pulling together. Bad. I could only nod, pressing the phone screen to my chest, like it might stop the ache rising in me. But then, Nora sat down across from me, fierce calm in her voice. They're writing your story for you. Are you really going to let them? I stared at her, the words sinking in deeper than I cared to admit. No, not this time. I powered off my phone and turned to the drawer where I'd been keeping the folder. My insurance, my truth. Inside was a carefully kept record. Years of receipts, screenshots, emails, bank statements. Proof of the thousands of dollars I'd funneled into that house, into those people, without ever once demanding gratitude. Electric bills in my name, mortgage payments from my account, repairs funded by my overtime shifts. They had forgotten the cost because they had never paid it. But I hadn't. I spent the next few hours scanning documents, organizing files. Every receipt was a memory, and every memory was a blade, cutting away whatever pity I might have felt. By evening, I had built an arsenal, a neat, unassailable fortress of evidence. Nora peeked into the room, her voice low. You going to post it? I looked up from the laptop, shaking my head. Not yet, I said. Let them talk a little more. Let them show everyone who they really are. Because I knew something Sylvia and Bethany hadn't counted on. I wasn't rushing into battle with blind anger. I wasn't swinging wildly like a wounded animal. I was patient now, strategic. The small town we lived in thrived on gossip, but it also crumbled fast when truth surfaced. All I had to do was wait for the right crack in their facade, the moment when their lies grew too bloated to hold themselves up. And when that moment came, I wouldn't have to say much, just the truth. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. I sat at the small dining table in Nora's apartment laptop, open heart hammering in my chest, but hands steady. The air smelled of leftover coffee and rain from the night before. Ordinary scents clashing against the extraordinary moment about to unfold. Carefully, I uploaded the thread. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was clinical. First, screenshots of my years of utility payments. Power, water, internet, each bearing my name, each dated clearly. Then came the bank statements, showing mortgage payments pulled monthly from my account, even when my mother's pension had been enough to cover them. I included old emails between me and the landlord messages, verifying I had funded repairs that had kept the house standing through harsh Illinois winters. Finally, I laid out a brief timeline. The years I sacrificed vacations, birthday celebrations, even simple self-care to keep a roof over their heads. And then, the ending, a simple statement. When they asked me to leave, they didn't just lose a daughter. They lost the person who kept the lights on when they weren't looking. I hit post. For a moment, there was silence. Only the faint hum of the fridge broke the stillness. Then, the phone began to buzz. It started slow, a few likes, some comments of shock, a few private messages from old school friends saying I always wondered why you stayed so long. Then, the momentum shifted like a dam breaking. Dozens of shares, hundreds of comments. Neighbors, former teachers, even people I barely remembered, started chiming in. One neighbor posted, "I remember seeing her shoveling their driveway, alone, when she was 16, while her parents yelled from the porch." Another, Sylvia, always bragged about how she never paid a cent for household bills once Madison got her job. Stories poured out like hidden wounds finally surfacing. It turned out people had seen more than they ever let on. They just hadn't spoken until someone dared to name the truth out loud. Meanwhile, Sylvia and Bethany panicked. First, my mother tried to counterattack. She posted a brittle, furious status. "We all have misunderstandings in families. My daughter exaggerates things for sympathy." Sad, really. It backfired instantly. Underneath, commenters weren't buying it anymore. "Funny how you never posted about her paying your bills until now," someone snarked. "You don't look too sick cashing her checks," another added, brutal in its honesty. Then, Bethany tried a different tactic. Pity. Voicemail after voicemail filled my inbox. "Madison, please. Your mother isn't well. I didn't know she was going to post that. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Please take it down before people think badly of us." There was a time when that pleading tone would have shattered me. Not anymore. I knew now it wasn't about regret. It was about reputation. But the most unexpected development came 3 days later, when I was sitting at my laptop, coffee in hand. The familiar ping of an email notification caught my attention. Subject: your story. Your voice. Let's talk. It was from a journalist at one of the largest women's magazines in the country. She said she'd read my post 3 times. Said it made her cry. Said her own sister had blocked her on Facebook last Thanksgiving, and no one in her family even mentioned it. "We want to run a feature," she wrote. "Not just about your story, but what it means for so many women out there who feel trapped in toxic family dynamics." I read her message twice before I replied. "I'm open, but only if we leave names out of it. This isn't about destroying people. I don't want revenge. I want others to feel less alone." She wrote back within minutes. "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say." The article was set to run in a week, but the real firestorm was already spreading. By Friday, Bethany and my mother were scrambling. They started posting vague things online. Bethany shared a picture of a flower arrangement with a caption, "Some people crave chaos more than peace." Later that day, Mom commented under a thread discussing my post. She edited the screenshots. They weren't even real, but people weren't buying it. Underneath that post, I saw names I hadn't heard in years. Janine, my old neighbor, commented I was at the wedding. "I saw how y'all treated her. Don't gaslight people now." Then, Mr. Hanley, my high school English teacher. "I've known Madison for over 20 years. She's not perfect, but she's honest. Don't even try." Then, there were the silent ones. Family friends, distant cousins. They didn't comment, but they liked every word defending me. Bethany tried to save face. She had a new product launch that weekend. Some organic skincare line she'd spent months hyping up. But by Saturday morning, 3 sponsors had pulled out. The posts promoting her launch were flooded with cheap doormat, no more hashtags, and questions like, "Is this the same Bethany from the essay?" She tried to delete them. Didn't work. I wasn't watching gleefully. In fact, I barely slept that night. There was a kind of ache that followed the whirlwind, a weight in my chest that didn't go away with the validation. I wasn't looking to destroy them, but maybe finally They couldn't destroy me, either. Around 11:30 p.m., after brushing my teeth and plugging in my phone to charge, I noticed a notification I almost missed. A message request from Bethany. Just 4 words, "You've won." For now. I stared at it for a long time, then turned off the screen and went to bed. But before I could even close my eyes, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voice message from an unknown number. I hesitated, then played it. The voice was young, nervous, but clear. "Hi, Madison. You don't know me, but I work at the courthouse. I probably shouldn't be calling, but your sister filed something today. Something big. Just be ready." The message ended. My blood ran cold. I didn't sleep that night. The anonymous warning echoed in my mind like a drumbeat I couldn't silence. Around 9:00 a.m., just as I finally managed to sit down with a lukewarm mug of coffee, my phone rang. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I hesitated, thumb hovering over decline, but something instinct maybe told me to answer. "Ms. Madison Westlake," a calm male voice asked. "Yes, this is she. My name is Daniel Hoskins. I'm your late father's attorney. I believe it's time we talk." I blinked. "Excuse me," he continued gently. "There are documents you weren't told about. Your father left a codicil. It was never filed. I think you'll want to see it." I sat up straighter, heart starting to pound. Wait. I was told he didn't even have a will, that it all defaulted to my mother. "That's what your family insisted," Mr. Hoskins replied. "But the truth is more complicated. And frankly, what happened may not have been legal." By noon, I was parked in front of a low brick building off a quiet street in Oak Brook. I hadn't been inside a law office since the day Dad died, when I'd signed some paperwork I barely understood. Papers they rushed me through while I was still in shock. Mr. Hoskins looked to be in his late 60s, with silver-rimmed glasses and a worn wedding ring. He gestured for me to sit, then handed me a folder with a soft, almost apologetic look. "I'm sorry you were kept in the dark, Ms. Westlake. Your father trusted me with this, and I should have done more to make sure you saw it sooner." I opened the folder. Inside, in Dad's handwriting, was a single page, dated just 8 months before he passed. The ink had smudged slightly in the corner. "If Madison chooses to walk away from the family," it read, "she inherits full ownership of the lakeside property and 35% of the remaining estate. She deserves freedom, and she deserves to be seen." My throat tightened. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Mr. Hoskins hesitated. "Your mother objected to its filing, claimed your father had changed his mind, but I have emails proving otherwise. She delayed the filing just long enough to push it past probate, and by then she rewrote the narrative. She stole it I finished for him." He nodded once. I sank back in the leather chair, heart pounding for different reasons now. Dad had known. Somehow he'd seen what I was too heartbroken to say, and he'd left me not just a gift, but a choice. "There's more," Mr. Hoskins added. "We also dug into your trust fund." I looked up sharply. "It was frozen when you were 24. Claimed reason poor financial judgment. Your mother submitted documents about a missed rent payment and a bounced check. That was 1 month. I just moved to New York." He slid over another document. What she didn't say was that she diverted the entire fund into an account under Bethany's name. Tuition housing, even a semester abroad. The paper blurred before me. How is that even legal? It wasn't. And now that you've discovered it, you have every right to sue for full recovery and damages. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stared at the numbers. What should have been my safety net, my independence, my father's promise, turned into a lifestyle accessory for the sister who just last week called me a leech. After I left the office, I didn't drive home. I headed north. The further I drove, the quieter it got. By the time I pulled into the gravel drive that wrapped around Dad's old lakeside cabin, the trees had swallowed all the noise. It was the first time I'd been back since he died. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. I unlocked the door. It groaned open. Dust covered every surface, but everything else was just as he'd left it. Dad's old mug on the counter, a fishing hat still hanging by the door. I walked slowly through each room, trailing my fingers over the worn wood, the places I used to curl up and read, while he hummed some old song on the porch. In the back bedroom, his room, I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside, tucked between a stack of faded receipts and a pack of gum, was a small photo. It was me, maybe 16, curled up next to him on the dock head on his shoulder. On the back, in his uneven scrawl, it read, "You don't owe them. Fly." I sat on the edge of the bed, that photo shaking in my hands, and for the first time in this entire mess, I cried. Not from grief, from clarity. He knew, he saw, even back then, and through all the noise, the gaslighting, the erasure, he'd left me a message that pierced through it all. The legal paperwork that followed was swift and devastating. I filed claims for the misappropriated trust fund, for the fraudulent blocking of Dad's will, for financial elder abuse, because that's what it was when an adult child's resources are systematically drained under emotional manipulation. But the real blow came when I had my attorney subpoena their financial records. What we found was worse than I'd imagined. Not only had they diverted my trust fund, but they'd been using a credit line opened in my name, one I'd never authorized. Designer bags for Bethany, a boat for Mom's boyfriend, even cosmetic procedures, all while I was working overtime to keep their lights on. The courthouse date was set for the following week, but before we could even get there, something unexpected happened. I was standing in line at the grocery store when my phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, there was a video attached. The thumbnail showed Bethany's face, red and furious. I stepped outside to the parking lot and played it. It was security footage from the night my belongings were burned. Clear as day, Bethany's car in the frame, her boyfriend carrying the box, and then audio. They'd been yelling at each other, not knowing the neighbor's Ring doorbell captured sound too. "Just burn it all." Bethany's voice, unmistakable. "She thinks she's so perfect. Let's see how she handles this." The person who sent it added a message. "Saw your story online. I'm your dad's old fishing buddy. This happened to be on my daughter's doorbell cam. Thought you should have it." I forwarded it immediately to my attorney. Then I sat in my car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd tried to destroy the last pieces of my father I had left, and they'd done it with smiles on their faces. When I finally brought everything to court, the trust fund fraud, the credit theft, the arson evidence, the judge's face went from skeptical to stunned to quietly furious. Bethany tried to cry. My mother attempted her usual confused, elderly woman act, but faced with bank records, video evidence, and a paper trail spanning years, their performances crumbled. The judge's words were measured, but sharp. This court has seen few cases of family financial abuse this extensive and calculated. The defendants will make full restitution plus damages. The number he announced made the courtroom go silent. It was everything they'd taken, plus interest, plus punitive damages for the arson. As we filed out, Bethany couldn't resist one last jab. She leaned close as she passed, hissing, "You destroyed our family." I looked her in the eye, calm as lake water. "No, I just stopped letting you destroy me." My attorney touched my elbow gently. "There's one more thing. Your father's cabin, it's yours now, free and clear, along with the remainder of the estate they tried to hide." I nodded, unable to speak, past the knot in my throat. That night, I drove back to the cabin. The sun was setting over the water, painting everything gold and amber. I stood on the dock where that photo was taken, where Dad and I used to fish in comfortable silence. I pulled out my phone and hit record. Not for evidence this time. For me. "Hi, Dad," I said to the video voice, steady despite the tears. I did it. I flew. The water lapped gently against the dock posts, and somewhere in the distance, a loon called out across the lake. It sounded like freedom. 6 months later, I stood in what used to be my father's study, now transformed into the headquarters of something I never imagined I'd create. The morning light streamed through the cabin windows, catching the brass nameplate on the desk, the Doormat Project. The journey here hadn't been simple. After the court ruling, Bethany and Sylvia had made a few desperate attempts to reconcile, not out of love, but because the financial reality had hit them hard. The restitution payments were automatic, pulled from their accounts monthly. Bethany's skincare business folded within weeks. Sylvia had to sell her car. They'd sent letters, each one a masterclass in manipulation. But I'd learned to recognize the patterns, now love-bombing guilt rage, silence repeat. I kept the letters in a file marked evidence, but I didn't read them anymore. The Doormat Project had started small, just a website with resources for adult children dealing with financial and emotional manipulation from family. Within 3 months, we had over 10,000 members. Stories poured in from around the world. Sons who'd been treated as ATMs, daughters who'd been guilted into giving up careers, relationships, dreams. Madison Anna, my assistant, knocked gently on the doorframe. "The Chicago Tribune is here for the interview." I smoothed my blazer, a deep burgundy this time, and followed her to the living room we'd converted into a meeting space. The journalist, a woman about my age, with kind eyes, shook my hand warmly. "I've been following your story since the original post," she said. "What you've built here, it's remarkable." We talked for an hour about the foundation, about the support groups we'd launched, about the legal aid fund that helped people escape financial abuse. But her last question caught me off guard. "Do you ever regret cutting them off completely?" I thought about it gazing out at the lake where Dad and I used to fish. "I regret that it was necessary," I said finally, "but I don't regret choosing myself." They taught me that love came with a price tag. Dad taught me it shouldn't cost your soul. After she left, I walked down to the dock. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from neighboring cabins. I'd made this walk a daily ritual, my moment of peace, before the day truly began. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. My finger hesitated over the delete button, but something made me open it. It was a photo. My cousin Sarah Sylvia's sister's daughter, holding a newborn. The message read, "Hi, Madison. I know we haven't talked in years. I wanted you to know I named her after you. After reading everything, you gave me the courage to set boundaries with my mom, too. Thank you." I stared at the photo for a long moment, then saved it. Not all family was lost. Just the ones who'd seen me as a resource, rather than a person. The sound of tires on gravel drew my attention. A car pulled up. A young woman stepped out. looking nervous, but determined. Another person, seeking help from the Doormat project. "Hi," she called out, voice shaky. "I'm Emma. We spoke on the phone about my parents and the house deed." "Hi, Emma," I said, walking back up the path to meet her. "Come on in. Let's get you some coffee and figure this out together." As I led her inside, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me stood straighter now. The dark circles were gone. The perpetual tension in her shoulders had vanished. She looked whole. That evening, after Emma left, with a folder of resources and a plan of action, I sat at Dad's old desk to write my weekly blog post for the project. This week's topic: when no contact is self-care. I thought about Bethany's last message, that ominous "you've won." For now, she'd been wrong about that. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about something much simpler and much harder. It was about finally understanding that real love doesn't keep score. It doesn't send invoices. It doesn't burn your father's memories when you stop paying. My fingers flew across the keyboard. They called me a cheap doormat, said I'd keep paying as long as they faked a smile. They were half right. I was cheap. I sold myself for the hope of love that was never really there. But doormats stay in place. They endure the mud and never move. I moved. I chose myself. And that choice gave me everything they tried: to take my father's legacy, my own voice, and the knowledge that I am worthy of love that doesn't cost me everything. I posted it and closed the laptop. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear over the lake. Somewhere in Naperville, my mother and sister were probably plotting their next move, composing their next sob story. But here in this cabin that Dad left for me, surrounded by the work that grew from my pain, I was finally home. Not the home I'd tried to buy with overtime and sacrifice. The home I'd built from boundaries and truth. My phone lit up with notifications, comments on the blog post, emails from project members, messages of support. I silenced it and made myself a cup of tea, Dad's favorite mug warm in my hands. Tomorrow, there would be more stories, more people seeking help, more work to do. But tonight, I sat by the window and watched the moonlight dance on the water, finally understanding what Dad meant all those years ago.